What's going on, my peoples, and welcome to the Blue Corner Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Coach Chris, aka the Green Eyes Coach. So let's talk about a little bit more of Saturday night, Jake Paul, or should I say, Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul, right? There's been a lot of people asking me about my last video, asking me why do I think that Anthony Joshua didn't take Jake Paul out a little bit sooner than what he did. Well, in my opinion, there's several factors why Anthony Joshua didn't take out Jake Paul. Let's begin by actually also looking at who Anthony Joshua was early in his career, right? Even as an amateur boxer, he didn't rely too much on footwork, right? He relied more on his size, his power, his strength, right? He was a decent boxer. He wasn't that robotic the way it's perceived, but he didn't really rely too much on his footwork. He didn't really rely too much on his feet. Although he did use his feet. I was watching some of his earlier fights in the amateurs, and he did use his feet fairly well against his opponents. And one good thing, he's always did rely behind the jab. I've always liked that about Anthony Joshua. That he was a little bit robotic, yes, but that's not really his fault either. You know what I mean? We all have different characteristics in the way we are as human beings, right? We're all made differently. We're all built differently, right? There's guys that are flexible. There's guys that are not flexible. There's guys that are powerful, and then there's guys that are not powerful, right? We see that in boxing all the time. And Anthony Joshua was a very, very powerful fighter, or is a very powerful fighter, right? Very big. He embodies what a world champion is supposed to look like. So that's one of the reasons that I believe that he didn't KO Jake Paul. It's just not in his style to use his feet, to be aggressively strategic. You know what I mean? Meaning sometimes there's fighters that know how to corner another fighter on the ropes or in the corner and put that pressure on and put combinations together and take them out of there. Anthony Joshua's never been that type of fighter. Once again, he comes from the UK, so they have more of a, that old school boxing where they literally just stand up straight, and use their hands for defense and blocking punches. You don't see a lot of head movements in their technique, although that is changing in the UK now after hiring coaches from the United States. A lot of these guys idolize our guys here in the States, respectively. And same way here in the UK, man. There's a lot of good UK fighters out there too that are very good to watch and learn from. But in Anthony's case, again, that's just not his style, okay? His style was more coming forward and keeping the fight in the pocket. If you look at Anthony Joshua, a lot of times he wasn't a guy who really took you to the ropes or allowed you to take him to the ropes too much, okay? So that's one criteria. Another criteria is the ring. The ring was huge. And that was in the contract, I believe, that Jake Paul put in and his peoples. And, of course, rightfully so. You know what I mean? They were trying to find any advantages they could against Anthony Joshua, who had more experience, was bigger. And, again, we see this in the videos a lot on YouTube where a guy walk into a gym and disrespect the gym and disrespect the coaches and want to challenge one of the fighters in the gym, right? And you see these fighters in the gym wanting to show these guys, listen, don't come over here and disrespect. And they'll go in there with the mentality where they're going to take this guy out in the first round. And a lot of times it's more difficult, right? Because you sort of like lose focus of your skills, of everything that you know how to do, because you're allowing your emotions to take over, right? And even if it's a slight degree, you know what I mean? You still lose some type of focus, right? And they go in there and they try to take these guys that are disrespectful out in the first round, and they're able to do it in the second round, right? And that's what happened, I think, here with Anthony Joshua also. I think Anthony Joshua really wanted to take this guy within the first round, and, his focus of his skills, maybe of what he needed to do in order to do that, didn't come through, okay? So that's one factor. Another factor that could have come to play also is just the fact that Jake Paul went on survival mode, man. Sometimes it's really difficult to knock out somebody who goes on survival mode. And that's what Jake Paul was doing. This is why I say I can't really respect the fact that he stepped into the ring with Anthony Joshua because he didn't really fight. You know what I mean? You could see in one round where they were giving him these instructions, and I was like, get the hell out of here. He's not going to be able to do none of that. Just let's keep it a buck. Let's keep it simple. Jay, run, stay away from Anthony Joshua, avoid that right hand, and let's see if we get lucky and you land that right hand. You know, and that was the strategy, obviously, you know what I mean, from Jake Paul. At least until he was in that ring and he saw, yo, listen, I think I made a mistake getting inside this ring. You know what I mean? So, that happens also a lot of times. That's why it's very important to, stay focused into your plan, guys. So those are the reasons that I believe that Anthony Joshua didn't take Jake Paul out sooner. And another reasoning also, probably he wanted to get some rounds. He's been away from the ring for a long time too, so he was probably a little rusty also. Rust does kick when you're not doing what you're normally doing. And that's, that could have been another simple reasons. He wanted to prolong a few rounds also, so he could be ready for Tyson Fury. So, listen, once again, it wasn't a bad thing for Anthony Joshua. It was a bad thing for Jake Paul. I'll see you guys on the next podcast, man. Peace and love. Be safe.